Hello, everyone. Welcome to our talk tonight on Zoom. My name is Mark Patry. I'm the co-owner of Galapagos Travel and CNH Tours. Thank you for taking some time out tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you're at, um, to hear me speak about Galapagos. I gave this talk last week. You probably saw it on our in our newsletters and whatnot, but we had over 100 people wanting to hear it. And my Zoom account was only set up for 100 people. So a few people were not able to get in. I'm so terribly sorry. And that's why I'm running it again today. So if you're one of those people who was frustrated last week, well, welcome. And thank you for your understanding. Tonight, I'm welcoming also people who are part of our bucket list nature travel group. It's a group that we cultivate on a platform called Meetup. It's very practical to bring people together who have common interests. So welcome to those who've joined us through the bucket list nature travel. Tonight I'll be talking to you about Galapagos, but first you'll have to bear with me as I tell you a bit about CNH Tours and Galapagos travel. Just give me a minute here. And as we go through the presentation, you might have some questions. I invite you to put them in the chat or to wait until the end of the talk, at which point I think we'll have enough time to spend as long as you want asking questions and getting my answers if I can answer them. So, as I said, I'm the co-owner, along with my wife, of Cultural and Natural Heritage Tours. It's a company that we've been running since 1999. We believe that we are among the best, the most knowledgeable, let's say, Galapagos travel companies out there. Why do I say that? It's because we have on our team very high level of expertise. First of all, my wife, Heather, is the TripAdvisor destination expert for Galapagos. The TripAdvisor invited her to be the forum destination expert because of all her informative responses to all the questions that are being asked on that particular forum. And our headquarters staff, which is highlighted in yellow here, we together have a collective 16 years of actually living and working in Galapagos, at the Charles Darwin Research Station with the Galapagos National Park Service. While there, we had the opportunity of participating in scientific expeditions throughout the archipelago. So just to say that we've been very much exposed to what Galapagos is all about. We also have a couple of sales advisors, Danielle and Tina, who are actually based in Galapagos. Daniela was born there. She's a naturalist guide, and Tina moved there when she was 97. She met a man, of course, and she moved there, and she's been working in the tourism side of things mostly for all that time. And she joined us just last year to help us with sales because we're getting too busy. I have been elected to the governing body of the Charles Darwin Foundation. So we have our company has very strong ties with the Charles Darwin Foundation and the research station. And I've also been elected to the governing body of the International Galapagos Tour Operators Association. This is an association whose objective is to improve the tourism experience in Galapagos. And finally, Cultural Natural Heritage Tours is regulated by the Travel Industry Council of Ontario. We're not a fly-by-night operation. We've been around for a long time, but there are such things as fly-by-night operations out there. And thanks to this regulatory framework, you can be assured that we operate in a very transparent manner, and your funds are very well managed. Beyond Galapagos, I'd just like to do a little plug for what else we do. We've been focusing on Galapagos for most of the time, but recently we've expanded. We've expanded because we've been able to find partners and associates and members of our team who are highly knowledgeable about these particular destinations. We do not enjoy organizing trips to places with which we don't have a close tie and a deep knowledge. So we've been able to find other people to help us put together fantastic trips to other parts of the world. So we've just finished last week. A group just finished visiting the Okavango and the Kalahari. We're running a trip to Madagascar in October, November. Easter Island, we do that in February. And Antarctica, we do that when the correct seasons in those parts of the world. We have an expert on our team. Pantanal in Brazil, the largest tropical wetland in the world, and where it's quite easy to see wild jaguars. And Provence, a trip I put together myself. I lived there for a year, and I have a very fond connection to that part of the world. So thank you for your patience. These are our other destinations. If ever Galapagos, if you've done Galapagos, or you're looking at other options, feel free to knock on our door. So tonight, getting right into our presentation, I'll be dealing with three topics. First of all, I'll give you a bit of a background on why Galapagos is special. Of course, we all see the documentaries, we see the animals are not particularly afraid of human beings, but beyond that, take it to the next level. Why is Galapagos special? And I'd like to try to at least touch on that tonight, so that you get a better impression of of what it's all about and why it's special. After that, we'll talk about conservation challenges. Even though on the documentaries we see on TV, it all looks like a paradise, there are challenges, there are difficulties there. So we'll be looking at those, and we'll be looking at how the efforts being made to try to deal with them. And then we'll be talking about our trips. So why is Galapagos special? In fact, it's special in a particular bureaucratic way, if you want. It was the first ever UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1978. UNESCO started inscribing, they say, or recognizing World Heritage Sites, and the first one ever to be recognized was Galapagos, and it has a file number one. Right now, we have over 1,500 World Heritage Sites, so Galapagos was the first. And why was it the first? Why was it so obvious as a World Heritage Site? Well, it's recognized in particular for its the way that biological evolution is manifested in Galapagos. How going to Galapagos with the right eyes, knowing what to look for, it gives you an insight on how species emerge. But why Galapagos and why nowhere else? There's several reasons. One of them is because Galapagos is an oceanic archipelago. What does that mean? That means these islands rose out of the sea. They were never connected to the mainland. They came about due to volcanic activity. And you can imagine when a volcano erupts from the sea, there's not much native life on those rocks, those hot rocks. So we start with the tabula rasa, a bare slate with nothing there in the middle of the ocean, far from everywhere. That's number one, a number one condition that set Galapagos up to become one of the hot spots for studying biological evolution. Because the archipelago is so far from the mainland, it's ecologically isolated. Very few species can actually make the journey. Of course, seabirds could make it. So most likely seabirds are the first species to colonize Galapagos. And eventually, over thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, due to chance, pure luck, other species started arriving. For instance, reptiles. How do reptiles cross 1,000 kilometers from Ecuador? Most likely during big storms on the mainland that would wash out huge swaths of vegetation out into the sea, that you'd have some iguanas and other types of reptiles hanging on. And occasionally, these might make it all the way to Galapagos, at which point these reptiles could get onto the islets. So those that survived ended up making it to Galapagos faced different environmental pressures. The conditions there were not the same as they were where they came from, and they either had to adapt, had to figure out how to survive, or they became extinct. So, for example, on the mainland, Ecuador, you have the green iguana. It looks just like this. You go to Galapagos, you'll see the land iguana. And Charles Darwin spent some time on the mainland before going to Galapagos, and he was making these observations. Charles Darwin knew that these islands were relatively young, geologically speaking. He could see that they were volcanic, that they arose out of the sea, and despite the prevailing thinking back in the early 1800s in terms of God and the creation of the world, Darwin had his doubts. So he started seeing these kinds of patterns when he went to Galapagos. On the coast, you'll have cormorants that look like this, but in Galapagos, they look like this. Over hundreds of thousands of years, those birds that invested less in developing their wings and found that they were actually better off than those that still could fly. And as a result, their genes were transferred. And today you have the flightless cormorant in Galapagos. And also in Galapagos, you have a lot of ecosystem diversity. So you may have the iguana arriving on one island and eventually crossing over to another island where it would face different environmental pressures. And as a result, over time, you might have two different iguanas in Galapagos. So you have small islands, you have big islands, you have low islands that are not very high altitude, and those that are higher altitude. Higher altitude islands tend to capture more moisture, so they're wetter, whereas the low altitude islands are drier. And some islands are close to other islands and some are far. And finally, as I said, some of the islands are drier and some of them are wetter. So all these factors combined help push speciation in Galapagos. So the land iguana, the green iguana arrived at Galapagos, eventually evolved, but then in Galapagos, a new iguana appeared, the marine iguana. This is the only lizard, the only iguana on the planet that feeds underwater, the marine iguana. I think, frankly, I think the marine iguana should be the iconic species for Galapagos and not the giant tortoise. The giant tortoise is quite, it's iconic. However, it exists in other places, whereas the marine iguana exists only in Galapagos. Um, So you also have different tortoises in Galapagos. Here we have two tortoises. Perhaps you look at them, they look the same, but they're not the same. You may have noticed that one of them has a distinct, what they call saddleback shaped shell, whereas the other one is called a dome-shaped tortoise, dome-shelled tortoise. Why the difference? When Darwin visited Galapagos, he had tea with the local governor at the time, and the governor boasted. He said, "Listen, you show me a tortoise, I'll tell you what island it's from." And Darwin asked, "Well, how do you know that?" He said, "Well, tortoises that live on low altitude islands where conditions are very dry, they have the saddleback shaped shells. Why is that? It allows them to reach that much higher with their necks up high into the branches of trees and cactus to reach vegetation because there's nothing on the ground. And tortoises with dome-shaped shells, they're on the higher altitude islands where the vegetation is quite common. They don't have to work that hard to find something to eat. So there you go. Well, Darwin was there. He was gathering that information, is entering his mind, and the wheels were turning. Right, it took him a long time to publish his famous book, but Galapagos, it was not the only place from which he got his inspiration. It helped move things along in his mind. Also, the islands, if you go to Galapagos, hopefully you'll have a chance to snorkel while you're there because the underwater part of Galapagos is a big part of the experience. And there's a lots going on there as well. And why? Because the islands are bathed by different currents. So there happen to be at a place where the cold currents in Antarctica, the Humboldt current, meet the warm currents from the tropical Pacific coming down from Panama. And they mix there. And also, from the west, the deep Cromwell current is very deep, but hits the Galapagos archipelago and comes to the surface, bringing oxygen and nutrients. So you're bringing very rich waters with full of oxygen, full of nutrients, mixing with the cold currents from the south, the warm currents from Panama, and you have a cornucopia of species of marine species there. And Galapagos is the only place on Earth where you'll see a penguin eating a tropical fish. So what do you have? When you go to Galapagos, what do you see? You're going to see all kinds of things, a bizarre collection of animals and plants that you'll see nowhere else on the planet. You'll see rich and diverse marine life, including many large-bodied species. So those of you who've had a chance to snorkel or even scuba dive, the Caribbean, Cozumel, Belize, or even the Great Barrier Reef. You'll come to Galapagos. So what strikes you in the Galapagos? Well, there's a lot of big things here to see. You'll see sea lions. Sea lions in Galapagos are like puppy dogs. If you're snorkeling, they're going to come to you and they're going to twirl in front of you as if they're saying, come and play with me, chase me. And if you're a good swimmer and a good snorkeler and you go underwater, and they'll be all around you. So that's one of the most impactful experiences people have when upon their return from Galapagos. You ask them what's the most memorable experience you had. Often it relates to sea lions. You'll see sea turtles. There'll be sharks, sharks that don't bite, rays, penguins, and a lot more. Beyond the very rich diversity of tropical fish. Most animals, as you know, are completely unafraid of humans. When I worked in Galapagos, we were having lunch at the Charles Darwin Research Station, and it wasn't a very good lunch, frankly. Rice was always the main part of our meal, and the local Darwin's finches knew that, and they would be pesky. You're having lunch, and they would land on the table and try to grab a grain of rice from your plate. So that's how unafraid they were. And the same goes for a lot of the other animals. The blue-footed boobies you see here on the lower left, they will often nest on a trail. They're right in the middle of a trail. They're sitting there nesting, and a group of people come along and they stare at you, thinking you think they're saying, "What are you doing here? Hey, can't you see I'm nesting here? Move along, move along." That kind of lack of wariness is a characteristic of the animals in Galapagos. Of course, the landscapes are quite spectacular. In this picture here, you're seeing different lava flows from tens of thousands of years difference between one and the other. So if you're into that kind of thing, if you're a geologist and you like volcanic landscapes, you'll be well served in Galapagos. There's one particular site that reminds me of a scene in the old Star Trek from the 1960s. When I was there, it seemed like all it was missing was that lizard monster that Captain Kirk was wrestling with. Um, so be prepared for a lot of fantastic landscapes. So that was my effort at telling you a little bit about Galapagos, why it's special, why it was recognized on the global level as a World Heritage Site. And now, though, I'd like to come back to the more challenging aspects of these islands. What kind of conservation challenges do they face, and what is being done to deal with them? And just looking at this picture brings back to me a lot of memories. What you see here is, first of all, the Pinnacle Rock, which is that pinnacle you see there. It's one of the iconic shots for people going to Galapagos. Beyond the pinnacle, there's not much more to say about it. But what I'd like to draw your attention to the island behind here. This is Santiago Island. It's 58,000 square kilometers. And this island, when I arrived in Galapagos in 1998, it was infested with pigs and goats. And pigs were introduced there, as were goats, because no mammals ever made it to Galapagos, save for a bat and a rat, which became a local native rice rat, which melded very well with the rest of the environment. Beyond that, there were no mammals in Galapagos. People came and we put goats and pigs everywhere, and this island was overrun by goats and pigs. So what is the impact of goats and pigs? Pigs are notorious for being able to find eggs. So who lays eggs in Galapagos? Giant tortoises. Also sea turtles. So the giant tortoise population of this island, there's no tortoise younger than 100 years old in this island when I was there. And similarly, the sea turtle nests were being systematically dug up and eaten by the pigs. And goats, what do? Goats are experts at eating things, right? They eat anything. And goats would transform forests into golf courses. So what was a forest had been turned into golf courses. I would see goats in trees reaching up to eat whatever branches and leaves were left in a tree. They would tear apart the land. So while I was there, we were involved in a project that ended up removing, to say it politely, the goats and the pigs. So this island no longer has goats and pigs, which is a good success story. So, but before let's step back a bit in time here, and we'll talk about the history of human impact in Galapagos. So the first person to record Galapagos was a Spanish priest who happened to be on a boat that drifted off because the winds were so fickle, and they discovered Galapagos in 1535. It wasn't settled until the early 1800s. It's not a very hospitable place for human habitation. It tends to be quite dry. There's not much soil to speak of. The water is scarce, so it wasn't like Hawaii or a place or Jamaica where life was good. There were actually fewer than 1,000 people until fairly recently. There was a bit of a spike in the Second World War. You might ask why. Galapagos is strategically located to a certain extent, not too far from the Panama Canal, especially if you're flying. In the Second World War, the Americans were concerned about the Japanese potentially attacking the canal, which is a very critical piece of infrastructure. And so the Americans built a base there with an airstrip. Uh, so right now we may have about 35,000 people living in Galapagos on 4 islands, most of them on three. There's a very small population on Floriana Island. But there are approximately a dozen or so larger islands in Galapagos, maybe 60 or 80, depending on how you count them, 100 smaller islands. So really only 5 islands are inhabited. The fifth one is where the airport is, and there's a small army base there still. So five islands are inhabited, and all the rest are uninhabited. So one of the challenges now is habitat destruction. So people live there and people have to make a living, they have to eat, so they bring cattle and cattle are grazing. And what used to be forest is now pasture. Of course, here we have, perhaps you saw it, a giant tortoise. They used to want to run around in the forest. Now there's pasture, but look at this. This is a dome-shaped shell here. So this is a tortoise that is used to living in wetter habitats, and it actually does quite well mixing with the cattle. So with this pasture, it eats very well. But here's a satellite picture of the highlands of Santa Cruz. You see those geometric patterns. Those are farm fields. Some are actively farmed, some are not. And why in the highlands? The highlands are where the clouds gather and where it rains and where over the thousands and thousands of years, soil has been able to develop there. And it's where, if you're going to farm, that's where you farm. Sadly, these same conditions, good soil and rain, is what makes for places of the highest biodiversity in Galapagos. This is where you'll have the Galapagos, the vermilion flycatcher there, for instance, and the name escapes me now, a type of tree that grows in the highlands. So Santa Cruz, a populated island, is quite affected by this, but all the other islands where there are no populations are less affected, obviously. Um, in the 1700s and 1800s, there was, unrestrained wildlife harvesting. It was like a free for all. The fur seals were hunted to commercial extinction. That means while the species was not extinct, it was just not worthwhile trying to find them anymore. So they let the few remain. And today that population is coming back. Um, Giant tortoises were a great source of meat for whalers and other ships crossing spending time in the Pacific. These people would be on boats for months and months and eating salt beef and that's all they'd eat. So when they came to islands like this and there were giant tortoises, they had felt no compunction in killing them and harvesting the meat, or even bringing them on board their ships and for later eating. And there were deliberate introductions, as I said, goats and pigs. Here's a dome-shaped tortoise. Usually it has a lot of food to eat on the ground, but with the goats, there's absolutely nothing around anymore. And so this is a big deal. And that's why I went to Galapagos, to help start up the largest ecological restoration project to try to get rid of the goats, which I have to say, on the Isabella Island, the north part, which was our target, we did get rid of the goats. So right now, if you went back to this very spot and took the same picture, there'd be no goats, and that tortoise would be hidden in all the vegetation. And also with people come cats, dogs, whatever, all the things we like to have along with us. And these animals there who don't really have any instinct to protect themselves from predators end up being easy prey. And things like blackberry, too. You don't think about often plants. So human beings, we love blackberries. People brought blackberries, but we're not the only ones who like blackberries. Birds love them. So birds eat this and they fly away and spread the seeds liberally throughout the islands. That's an issue. And of course, rats, plants, and don't forget viruses and more. When I was there, and small insects, the cottony cushion scale was attacking the mangroves, an introduced species, the scale insect. And the Charles Darwin Research Station was able to find a biological way to control it, which is a great success story. So management response as well. I mean, the park was created, so starting to look at how to manage this place to reduce the impact of human activity. The Darwin Research Station was created to help provide scientific and practical research support to the park so that you can come up with plans and approaches to deal with conservation challenges. For instance, the first big project of the station was to breed giant tortoises in captivity. That took a long time to figure out. In fact, the woman who led that effort and who succeeded in finding how to breed how to raise tortoises in captivity. She's the one who hired me to go work down there, Linda Kaya. So restoration, here we are, releasing some tortoises into the wild. If you're visiting Puerto Lloro, the main town in Galapagos, you'll see the breeding center for the tortoises, and there's nothing cuter than the tortoise the size of a ping pong ball wandering around their pens. Maybe there's something cuter, I don't know, but it's pretty cute. There is a quarantine a service in place. So if you're going to be going to Galapagos, you'll have your bags checked. There's some products they don't want you to bring over. So they're trying to keep people from bringing things there now. Uh, Big projects at eradication and control of alien species. That's what I was mostly involved with. This picture here is a helicopter. It's going to be distributing rat poison on one of the smaller islands. And a big challenge is rats because they're hard to get. You need to get you need to get every single one. You can leave one last male if you like, but you can't leave a pregnant female. And how do you determine whether you've gotten every single rat on an island? I could talk for a couple of hours on this, but I'll spare you now. So part two, or part three, I think it is now, we're going to talk about our trip. So our trips, we started off with why Galapagos is special. We talked about the challenges and the responses. So basically, I'm telling you, hey, it's a special place. You know, if you're going there, you know, we encourage you to try to understand why it's special. Also, go in there with full realization that people live there and there are daily challenges. But that doesn't stop you then from going there and enjoying yourself and really making the best out of your time in the islands. So I'm going to be talking now about our custom expedition cruises. I've got two logos here, Galapagos Travel and CNH Tours. Galapagos Travel was another company until last year, managed out of California, established in 1989 by Barry Boyce. When I lived in Galapagos, I met Barry Boyce. We went scuba diving together. I knew about his company. And eventually we started our own company. And just last year, his successor, Mark Grantham, told us he was retiring. His team was retiring, and you know, they're going to close shop. So we struck a deal, and I took over with my wife Galapagos Travel, and both our companies were very positive about this deal because both our companies had the same approach, the same vision when dealing with Galapagos, and so it was a natural fit. That's why I have the two logos at this point. So we're going to tell you about our custom cruises here. And before I do that, I want to share with you what guides us in designing these custom expedition cruises and working and having the focus we do on these cruises. First of all, I'd like to share you what our assumptions are about you, about your expectations. We may be completely wrong. And if we're wrong, then you're probably not going to want to try to book a cruise with us. But we hope we're right. And we have been right. In the past, if the past 20 or 30 years having this show for it is that people have been coming back without much advertising at all, word of mouth. Our company has grown, and people come to us because they know we provide a good product. So we're assuming that you're not looking for a Caribbean type of cruise holiday. You know, you're not going to be in a big ship focused on all the pleasures on board with the occasional, sorties during the day. No, that's not what we're looking for. We're assuming also you're keen on learning. You want to be exposed to ideas and new concepts, learning about conservation challenges in Galapagos, what makes Galapagos special. And learning is built into our trips. We also, assuming that you recognize and appreciate the value of an exceptional naturalist guide. Some people feel a naturalist guide is going to be a burden. It's going to keep them from being free and doing what they want. And Galapagos is a completely different story. You're first of all, you have to be accompanied by a guide, but a guide, a good one, will make a huge difference in your appreciation of your time there. They're helping you see things you would not normally have seen. They're helping you understand things that you would not even have thought about, and they help you basically have a wonderful time. We're assuming that you want to maximize exposure to what Galapagos is all about. So you're not necessarily keen on sleeping in till 9 o'clock every morning and maybe, you know, wandering off the ship for an hour or two and then spending the rest of the day on board reading a book. You want to be out there. You want to be out there as much as possible, early in the morning, later in the afternoon, and snorkeling, kayaking, hiking. That's what we assume. Of course, we're assuming you're not afraid of going the extra mile to do so. So what does that mean, the extra mile? I'm not talking about distance, in fact. Just as an aside, hiking in Galapagos is you don't need to be an Ironman. You're there to observe nature. You're there to soak it all up. And you don't do that on the run. You do that when you're walking slowly. You do that when you stop frequently. You stop for 15 minutes. You might stop, sit down 15, 20 minutes and see the green iguanas interact with the penguins and the sea lions all around you. So going the extra mile means you're going to take your time, you're going to be patient, and maybe you'll have to get up a bit early to appreciate the best wildlife displays. So these are the kinds of things we assume you're willing to do in order to get the most out of your time in Galapagos. So having said all that, I think it comes, having shared our assumptions with you, then we talk about our vision. What is our vision for a great exposure to Galapagos? Well, we feel that any trip, and Galapagos in particular, should also be a mind trip that's nurtured by all your senses, by mind. It's one thing to be oohed and awed by wonderful wildlife displays like you see here. If you're snorkeling and you see this right below you, it is amazing. Uh, but also, we want to make sure that not only are you amazed and thrilled and awed by this, what you're seeing, but also it trickles back into your mind so that it helps you develop a deeper understanding of what you're seeing here and what it means. We want to minimize the distractions of day-to-day life. So we want to give your senses a chance to tune in to both the subtle and the not so subtle stimuli of the islands. The not so subtle stimuli is what you see right here: sea lions swimming and eating fish, or sharks swimming by you. But there are also subtle stimuli that are worth tuning into. Hold on, I can't see what's set up here because my Zoom panel's there. Okay. We want you to spend more time being among the islands, on and in the sea. So as much as possible, be out there. Be out there. Don't spend time relaxing on a boat more than you need to. Of course, if you're tired, because our trips can be tiring, take some time off by all means. But we're making it so that it's easier. You have the opportunity to spend as much time as you want out there. Whereas some trips, not so much. And finally, we want to create an environment that helps you to develop a sense of place and allowing you to tune in to the spirit of Galapagos. So I like this picture. It's just a just a blank background, just a blue sea and this lone penguin looking down for its next meal with a few bubbles popping up. There's something magical about this picture. A friend of mine took it when we were there a couple of years ago. We want you to tune into the spirit of Galapagos and really feel the awesome nature of it all. That's what we're hoping. We're hoping that you could arrive at that point in our trips. So, having said all that, what we're doing, what we see now, as someone having been in the business for 25 years, we see trends. We see trends. When we first arrived in Galapagos, the ships operating were a ragtag collection of ships. Some of them were literally falling apart. Nothing fancy. But over the years, and it's been a good thing, these old ships have been replaced by nicer ships, nicer and nicer ships. One new ship is now called the Mega Catamaran. It just came out, and the promoters are very proud of it, and they're calling it the Mega Catamaran. And we see this, we feel like this is a sign that things are not going in the right direction, at least for the kinds of trips we're trying to offer. So there's more and more out there among the marketers of Galapagos cruises. There's an assumption that there's priorities a relaxing holiday. Nothing wrong with a relaxing holiday. I love a relaxing holiday. We feel that in Galapagos, you should relax after you're done your trip, not on your trip. Otherwise, you'll miss out. Of course, you'll have a chance to relax on the boat, but it's not about spending your day in a jacuzzi, let's say. And one of our boats has a whirlpool top, so it's not as if we don't have that kind of thing. Also, companies are offering shorter and shorter itineraries. People are in a rush, oh yeah, I want to go to Galapagos, but what am I going to do for 8 days on a boat or 12 days on a boat? That's too long. So 4 days, they're offering trips. These trips didn't exist before. It used to be 8 days, standard 8-day trip. And what happens now is if you want to do an 8-day trip, you have to often, unless you're on one of our trips, there are other trips that offer full 8-day itineraries that are not interrupted, but often they would be interrupted. So you're on for 8 days, but some people are coming and going halfway through your trip. and that disturbs the whole rhythm of your experience. Also, there's more focus on onboard luxuries. Hey, we all like onboard luxuries. That's fine. But cigar smoking room maybe is we don't think that's necessary. And we our main focus is make sure you're comfortable on board. You have good food, good crew, clean, well managed boat. Let's go. If you got that, that's great. The rest, let's focus on what's going on off the ship. So we have three trips that are custom to us only. If you want to take these trips, you have to come through us, and we'll make sure that not only you'll be on our trip, but you'll be with people who also want to be on our trip, which is an important thing to consider. Because you want to try to avoid there's some situations you have some people who are not that keen on getting up early. You are keen on getting up early, and it causes a bit of conflict. So we have the active Galapagos on the 14 passenger Samba. They have 8 days on board. This is a very simple but extremely well managed ship. In fact, the owner of the ship, the family that owns the ship, the Salcedo family, the main protagonist there, Juan, he's got two daughters. They're a bit younger than my two sons. I keep on telling him, hey, maybe we should, arrange marriages here to solidify our business partnership. And he laughs and just ignores me. We also run the natural history tour on a 16 passenger Montserrat. This is you're 11 days on board here. These are uninterrupted itineraries. You're full on. You're not having people come and go halfway through. It's a bit more comfortable than the Samba. And then we have the slow photo or art tour on the 15 passenger Nahi. This is a full 15 days on board. You do this trip, you're going to see a lot more Galapagos than Charles Darwin ever saw. Charles Darwin was in Galapagos in 1835. He was there for 5 weeks. Almost half of that time, he was on a boat on the Beagle, just trying to get from point A to point B, and the winds being very fickle. And he spent more days on board than he wanted to. So those are three trips. I'll just quickly go over each one in terms of what sets them apart. I mean, in a sense, they're very similar in that they want to expose you to the best of what Galapagos has to offer. They're going to be assuming you don't mind getting up early to get out there when conditions are best. And there you go. So this one here, the Samba, the Active Galapagos, is a 8-day itinerary. I like to say from dawn till dusk and beyond. When I was last on that ship, they were knocking on my door at 5:30 in the morning saying, Mark, let's go. If you want a cup of coffee before getting off the ship, get up now, because we hope to get off at 6, just after sunrise. Because that's when we'll be seeing, I forget what it was, but the greatest display for these species, that's when they're doing it at sunrise, and it'll be wonderful. So great. The Samba, does spend a lot of time on snorkeling. In fact, typically the guide will be snorkeling with you, of course, but on the Samba, the captain often gets in the water with you as well. So he's also very enthusiastic about snorkeling, which is very rare for captains to do. The underwater Galapagos is a big part of the experience. They have kayaks and paddleboards, so giving you more opportunities to explore the shorelines. And this one here is for reference sake, it's a US 5,000 per person for the cruise. I have Canadians and Americans on this chat tonight, on this presentation, and our prices are all in US dollars because the US dollar is the national currency in Ecuador. They adopted the US dollar in 2001, I believe, when we were living there. It was quite an interesting process. And this is a typical itinerary for the Samba, quite adventurous. It heads way up there north to Marchena Island. Marchena Island is the larger one at the top. It's the Samba, and one of the ship, the only two ships on the planet that go there on that and take you snorkeling there. So you're looking at very, very pristine places for snorkeling. In fact, most of Galapagos is pretty pristine for snorkeling. Then we have the Montserrat, where we have 16 guests, but 2 naturalist guides. In Galapagos, the regulations require that a naturalist guide be with no more than 16 guests. So typically, we could have just one naturalist guide on this ship, just one. But we decided to hire a second one. Why? Because we want to make sure you're in smaller groups, more attention from the guides, and a bit more versatility in what you do and how you do it. This is a 10-night, 11-day itinerary. And this is the natural history tours where the guides give natural history type presentations in the evening. We're not talking about university courses in the evening. I have to say, you're going to be pretty knackered. So you're not going to have much attention span for a 1 hour university level course. So the guides, they adapt it to the fact that you're tired, and but they will provide you with nice presentations on different aspects of natural history of Galapagos. Plenty of times on the trails and in and on the water, like on all our trips. And this one, it starts at seven. It is at 7,365. This is 226. The year 226 prices person. And this is a map of the itinerary, which you see will venture to more places than the Samba does. And finally, we have the slow photo art tour on the Anahi, a catamaran. I was having a challenge on how to call this thing. It is actually a photo tour because on board we have world-renowned Galapagos photographer Tui Roy, who next week is in fact receiving an award by I think the American Nature Photography Association or something like this in Arizona. And that's where she is next week. But she is your onboard resource person for helping you better see Galapagos. She's not going to show you, how to use your camera, but she's going to show you, hey, these are good shots here. Let's go here now. This is a good, if you take this angle, you'll see the background, this kind of thing. She'll help you understand the Galapagos from a photographer's perspective. But we also call it an artistic tour. There's a lot of people come to Galapagos. They like to draw, sketch. So this trip will be slow. Our other trips are not fast, but this one will be even slower. We will get off on land and just spend time relaxing, soaking it all in. So this is the trip ideal for those who love to linger. You don't have to be a photographer. If you're not a photographer, you'll still have a wonderful time. Here goes two naturalist guides plus Huida Roy, the photographer, for 15 guests. 15 days, full archipelago circumnavigation, and early disembarkation as well. That's when the light is best for photography, and generous time on land. And this one is 14,000 per person, includes only. Although I will shamelessly advertise that our July trip has 4 spots left, and we're keen on selling it. And we've reduced it to, I believe, 11,000 exceptionally. So if you're free this July and this trip is appealing to you, let us know. And we have 4 spots left. And here's a sample itinerary of this is the 15-day itinerary of the Anahi. So you're basically going throughout the archipelago. Notice that you're not going to that Marchena Island up top, though. That's the one the Samba goes to, one of the 2 ships that goes there. So park rules, as I said, naturalist guides are very important to your experience. And we take that seriously. The park rules require no more than 16 per group. You must be with your guide at all times. And the quality of a guide is extremely variable, however. It's one of the best paid jobs in Galapagos. It doesn't mean you're making millions, but it's better than working in a restaurant. And there's a lot of demand to be a guide. And the park makes people take classes and then they have to pass a test. And there's a lot of pressure to license more and more guides. As a result, you're getting perhaps guides that I think are not the greatest. So I have to say, and this is very important, we handpick our naturalist guides for our trips. We don't just get anybody. We make sure they're people who have great reputations as guides. This picture here is Daniel Fitter, and he's the guy we're using to help us find our guides. He's been a guide. Let's just continue here. I've asked Daniel, in fact, to tell us in his mind what a good naturalist guide is, and we filmed him doing this, responding to us a couple days last week. And this, if you bear with me, here's a 4-minute Hi, Daniel. Thing. How are things down there in Galapagos today?
Morning, Mark. Everything's really well.
Can you hear him?
Nice sunny day, and everything's looking good. How are you?
Nice. Fine. Nice to see you again, and I look forward to seeing you in person in Galapagos when we're there next March. Thanks for doing this today for us, Daniel. As I told you, I'm recording this and we'll be presenting it to the group of people who are interested in more about Galapagos and particularly about our custom trips run through Galapagos Travel and CNH Tours. And I told them how you are the person, the guide that we rely on to find and hire and reserve the naturalist guides to work on our trip. So I was hoping you can give us very quickly the kinds of things you look for in a good naturalist guide, so that our guests, our future guests, could understand what it takes to be a good naturalist guide. So please, over to you.
Okay, well, I've been here a long time. I was actually born here. My grandfather moved here in the 1930s, and I'm a naturalist guide myself. So I've been working at this for about 38 years. And I worked a lot of boats as a sole guide as also and working as a team. And the question always comes up, what are passengers actually looking for in their guides? And so I've got a few things that are pointers that will hopefully interest one. The first one is they want knowledge of the Galapagos, but most people don't want too much technical scientific knowledge. So they want an understanding of how things works, but in their own language and terms, because as soon as you get into too much scientific stuff, unless they're scientists, it's kind of hard to understand. So I always try make sure that interpretations of things are simple and easy and short to understand. Up-to-date developments of conservation issues are very important. People like to know what's going on the conservation level in a place like Galapagos. And then a pretty good overall understanding of the country's situation and history. So you want to have a little bit of an idea of what's going on in Ecuador, sure, the political situation, the history of Ecuador, how Galapagos became part of Ecuador, that type of thing, because people are always interested in human history. And that is important to have a little bit of understanding of that. A couple of technical things that are also very useful are kind and friendly formal and informal communication, both on shore and during the evening chats. So you don't want to make things too formal. You don't want chats to be, listen to this lecture because you're going to pass an exam. You just want it to be conversational and easy to understand stuff. And also another point is to give passengers time to relax and enjoy the environment they're in. One of the biggest problems is passengers often complain about the fact, yeah, the guide's got a lot of information and gives us a lot of information, but we never actually have time to just watch and see and look. So guides that actually say, look, let's go to the cliff and sit down for 50 minutes and just see what happens. Passengers really enjoy that. In other words, the bottom line is you don't have to talk the whole time. You don't have to be filling up every quiet space with sound. Going back also, passengers particularly like, although there's natural history, they do like to have the human history. People who lived here, the families that first moved here, the historical side, the pirates and all that type of stuff, they do like to understand how the humans relate to the Galapagos Islands.
Well, you're well placed for that with your family history. Yes.
Yeah, I've got a lot of family history here. And then a couple of little things that just keep in mind is emotional alertness, knowing when to attend and when not to attend to passengers. Seeing what their issues are and being discreet about those issues, because you suddenly become involved in the lives of people you don't really know. Excuse me. And so you've got to be careful about that, because you don't know their backgrounds, you don't know their circumstances, and you want to be respectful of those things. Sure. So just be discreet about that. A good sense of humor is useful. Obviously, you don't have to be a stand-up comedian, but just, most things go through with a bit of humor. And passengers always get very attached to their guides and trust their guides. So a good sense of respect and limits that you actually form with your guides, with your passengers, sorry. So that kind of helps make a trip really good. And of course, we try to make sure that we get guides that can do a reasonable degree of those things.
Very good, Dan. I appreciate the time you spent. We don't have much more time than that because already my presentation is packed full of information. And I know you will be guiding on some of our trips. So perhaps some people watching you right now will be meeting you in person in Galapagos in the not too distant future. So once again, Daniel, thank you for having done this, and have a good afternoon and what appears to be a nice day in Galapagos. And please say hello to your good wife, Tina, for me. Take care.
Will do, Mark. Thank you very much. And take care, okay? Bye-bye.
Okay, so, all right. I trust you saw that and understood that. I'd like to add one last thing, though. One of the most critical components, and I alluded to that earlier in our talk, is our guests. We, by advertising, by talking about our trips the way we talk about them, like tonight, when I said we have to get up early, we're out as much as possible. We like to go snorkeling. We're keen learners. We tend to attract, a very fun group of people. I think one of the things I often hear from returning guests is, oh, I made friends with everybody on board. They're great. We had a great time. So a lot of people tend to be worried about, oh, there's going to be some weird people on the ship and I'm going to be stuck with them for a week or 15 days. But the response we get from our returning guests is, hey, we had a wonderful time. And the people on board were a lot of fun as well. So thank you, guests, for being who you are. So that takes me to the last bit of my presentation. It's a 1.5 minute cameo appearance. One of the people on this video is actually here tonight, James and Joyce, two of the people, James and Joyce from Alaska. We were talking about a trip to Antarctica last year, and somehow they started talking about their trip to Galapagos. And now it turns out that they're going again to Galapagos from what I understand. So let's just hear a bit of a cameo, a bit of I call it a non what do they call it? Here you go. Listen. Departure for Antarctica, or that wouldn't interest you because you've been already. But and Juan wants to be our tour leader, and he's done seven tours to Antarctica already. He's led 7 tours to Antarctica. So we're just talking to him about that right now.
I'll give you a shameless plug. The Galapagos was one of the best trips we've ever taken, bar none.
I'm happy to hear that.
I totally agree. James and I have told so many people that, saying it was a trip of a lifetime, just magical from sunrise to sunset every day. It was amazing.
I'm glad to hear that.
I'm really glad to hear that. We leave April 23rd. For our trip down to Quito and then the Galapagos. So thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
No, your expectations are too high.
Real high.
Not that good. Not that good.
It is better than it was better than any other trip we've ever taken, and it was one I would actually repeat. And there's not a lot of trips I would repeat, but that one, by day 3 or 4, we were exhausted, and it didn't matter. We had to just get up and keep pushing because every day was so exciting and so different. And yeah.
When they're banging on your door at 5:30 in the morning, okay, you gotta get up. What? Sure. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm glad. Well, I hope you shouted out for the mountaintops in Alaska. Okay, so that was that. That was my last bit of the presentation. It's on my clock, 8:25, 8:24. So we got I said this would be an hour long, and if people want to leave, I'm not hurt. I'm not hurt. So if you leave, that's fine. If you want to stay, that's cool. I'm willing to stay longer. I can. What I'm going to do now is go to the chat and see what kind of questions might have appeared there. I don't see that many. We can also open it up. It's a relatively small group. People want to talk. That's just fine by me. So. Yes. How early will we need to get up? Well, we mentioned 5:30 a couple of times during the presentation. No, it's not every day 5:30. I have to be honest with you. There may be on your 2-week trip or 8-day trip once, maybe twice 5:30, but it could be 6:30, 6. That could be more usual. Remember though that by 5:30 dawn is coming, and like at 5:30 or 5:15, it's still black. By 5:30. You could tell dawn is there, and by 6 the sun's up. This is the equator. The sun, the night, and the day. What's it called? The night falls and the sun rises very quickly. You don't have long, lingering sunsets. So, and there's nothing. Frankly, I love being on the deck of the ship. You got a cup of coffee. It could be 5:30. I'm an early riser, and you're anchored. And there's a volcanic landscape. It could be calm sea, and you look down below. There might be a school of rays swimming silently. I'm gonna stop the share here. Swimming silently below the ship. You hear the gulls. Whatever. It's beautiful. So there you go. I hope that's not this doesn't scare you too much. I'm looking for the chat here. Oh yes. How far will we be hiking? Never very far. The hikes are not long. As I said. They're not long in terms of distance. They could be long in terms of time because you're walking. You may be walking 300 meters, and you stop for 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, depending. Walk another 100 meters and do the same. So you may walk no more than a kilometer and a half, a mile. It's rare that you'll walk more than a mile and a half on the trails. Rare, but you might spend 2 hours doing that because that's what you want to do. How much time will be spent snorkeling? Basically as much as you want. There'll be snorkeling typically every day, and typically you'll snorkel. You go out into the water with your group of people. There'll be someone on the Zodiac, not next to you, but close by, keeping an eye on things. If you want to get out, you raise your hand. They'll come over, pick you up. If you want to stay in, you stay in. You stay in as long as you want. So snorkeling is one of the pleasures there, and our ships make sure you get as much as you want. How does one handle seasickness? Well, hey, it depends. You get sick overboard or into the bathroom, into the toilet. Um, we have we have we do we do survey our returning guests, and one of the questions we ask is, "Hey, did seasickness affect your enjoyment of the trip?" So 1 to 5, one none at all, 5 like I wanted to get off the ship. And what I don't have the numbers under my fingertips, but I think it's 89 or 90% is 1 and 2, and then like 3% is 4 and 5 or something like this, or 2%. It's very small. And these are people who've been on the ship, and this is for the Samba, the small ship. And these are people who have been on the ship throughout the year. So the seas tend to be calmer in January to April, and tend to be a bit choppier June to November. You can get a bit of chop any time of year and some calm any time of year, but you won't get any big storms in Galapagos. And typically, I've been monitoring social media, all this stuff for years, and people tend to, what I see is you take the scopolamine patch, I think it is, or this or that, and it helps tremendously. I know there's someone on this chat here, this presentation who's particularly concerned about that. When to go, Shelley? When to go? Anytime. Where do you live, Shelley? I say, if you live in is that you, Shelley? Okay, you can unmute if you want to tell me where you live, or write it down. I can see you. Anyway, if you live where a place like where I live, where from about November to March, April, it's not very nice weather. It's cold. CT, I guess that's Connecticut. Is that it? So I guess it's a bit cold there in the winter. So go in the winter if you don't like winter. The winter in Galapagos, those months, it's hot. Some people might say it's oppressively hot, but I like it. The water is warmer, calmer. It rains from time to time, but not that much. You might have 1 or 2 downfalls that last for a short period of time while you're there, and the vegetation greens up. So it's nice to be away from the winter into a nice warm tropical environment. However, if you're from Houston, maybe you don't like, you'd rather not be in Houston in the summer months or in Florida or something like this. So that's a good time to go as well. You go June, July, the days are nice and warm. It's still very warm and pleasant, shorts and t-shirt. The evenings are fresher. You might want to wear a little fleece jacket if you're on the boat. And the seas are cooler as well. Throughout the year, wildlife is fantastic though. There's no reason to go unless you want to see the sea lion pups when they're 3 or 4 weeks old or whatever. If you want to do that, well, then you have to go these couple of months, right? Otherwise, there's wonderful things to see all year long. So that's my answer to that question. I may have missed it, but where did we fly into? And yes, I didn't get into the logistics very much of this trip, but Galapagos is served by mainland Ecuador. So you fly into Galapagos from mainland Ecuador. Our trips, we recommend you all arrive a couple of days before into Quito. So that helps deal with any potential flight problems, like the air traffic controllers aren't working so well and there's delays, you miss a flight. You don't want to arrive in in Ecuador a day late and miss your cruise. So you arrive 2 days early, spend a couple of nights in Quito. We use a very, very nice hotel, and we have our people do a city day tour. It is a World Heritage City. I said Galapagos was #1 World Heritage Site. Guess what #2 was? Quito. So it's a nice city. So that's what we have people do: arrive into Quito, spend a couple nights, get over your travel fatigue, and that way when you get to Galapagos, you're ready to go. So that's that. I don't see any other questions out there. I see Jim and Joyce from Alaska. I know you are. Have you committed yet to a second trip, or are you still working on the details?
Yeah, I communicated with Heather. We were able to put together 14 people counting us, so we're gonna do the whole Samba.
That's wonderful.
February of 2027.
That's
And
fantastic.
one thing I wanted to say, Mark, is that if anybody who goes on these trips, at least we went on the Samba, so I can only speak for that, but we would be out in the Zodiac and we would be going to an island or we were going to snorkel and something else came up that was very interesting or that was unusual, they would stop and we would do that instead. So you have to be a little bit flexible. I like,
Yeah.
we did one snorkel through this volcanic cauldron.
Caldera.
The caldera, where we just drifted through and we got out on the other side and we said, can we do that again? That was so easy. And they were like, sure. And they just took us around. And so you're not limited to, okay, your time is 10 to 10:15 and that's all you get.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So if you show enthusiasm, they love it. The crew and the guides love it. Yeah. There was an incident too with where the ship was rounding the southwestern part of Isabella Island, and it was a calm day. The seas were very calm, and it was captain saw something in the distance. Hey, what's that in the surface? Very weird. So shall we take the 2 kilometer detour in a boat all in the wrong direction and check it out? Yeah. So they went there. It happened to be like a group of 15 or 20 whale sharks feeding at the surface. So they went right there. They cut the engines. They were floating among whale sharks just all around them. And they got there just as it was getting dark, though, so they didn't get a chance to see it very well. So 2 weeks later, this is how they work, right? They say 2 weeks later, they told the guests on board, listen, we're here now, but if we leave an hour early, 2 weeks ago when we came here, we saw these whales. They might be there, they may not be there, but if they're there, we could arrive when there's still daylight. And they talked to the guests. They go, oh yeah, let's try it, let's check it out. So they went out, and it happened that whale sharks were still there, and they got the chance to see them very well. We got some video footage of the whale sharks. In fact, one whale shark hit the rudder of the boat and damaged the rudder, which caused a bit of a problem, but otherwise it was that kind of thing happens. Yeah. So there you go. It's 8:33. I said this would last an hour. I'm happy to stay if there are questions, but if there are no questions, I haven't had dinner yet. So, well, how far in advance do we need to book? I like questions, so I'll be here for a long time if you keep on asking them. Angela asks, how far in advance do we need to book? Well, it depends. I mean, as someone who works in the business, I love it when people book 2 years in advance, right? It helps, we know it's coming down the pipeline, and we can prepare you and everything. There's no surprises. But if you can turn on a dime, if you're a solo traveler or a small group and you're willing to be flexible on exact dates or the exact ship, you can book a month in advance, 2 months in advance. You may luck out, you may not luck out, but if you want exactly this ship, that itinerary, it's always better to book in advance. If you're booking at Christmas time, at least a year. If you're booking in the summer, 10 months, whatever, to make sure you have all the options open to you when considering your trip to Galapagos. We're hoping to travel in October, November 26th. That's great, Angela. That's good. Yeah, that's last time I was in Galapagos. Was that the last time? I forget now. I was there once in November. It was wonderful. Yeah. So on the Samba, just for a few days. Yeah. Okay, listen, we're down to 12 people here. Nice seeing you all. Jim and Joyce.
Can I just?
Oh, Shelley, of course.
I just have a quick question. It's a little bit a divergence, but we took a great trip up in Alaska with the boat company. Do you have a relationship with them at all?
No, we don't. No.
Okay, then
Sorry.
never mind. Okay.
I was going to say to Jim and Joyce, we're going to be seeing you in the south of France, right, in September this year. So looking forward to meeting you in person. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it as well.
Great. And,
Thank you.
All right, thank you, folks. And I see my brother there. My brother's in on this, and he's going to be joining me next year in Galapagos. He's the one who's scared about being seasick. Oh boy. We'll see about that.
You reassured me, Mark. Now I feel really good.
All right. Okay. Yeah. All right.
I'm doing it. So I'm going to make sure I come into your room when I'm not feeling well.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
All right.
All right. I think we should cut this off now.
Okay.
Nice to see you all, folks. Have a nice late afternoon or evening, depending where you're at, and we'll talk to you again. We have our talk about Easter Island is tomorrow. If you want to join us on that.
Ooh.
Bye.
But